Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Facebook Live, where we are going to be talking about the forthcoming conference, Activating New Leadership, the Key to Humanity's Future. It's a conference that's taking place online for 3 days in November, the 22nd to the 24th of November in this year, 2024. So Michael Lindfield and I, both of us representing the community of living ethics, are very happy to be here. We'll chat a bit, share our thoughts on this forthcoming event, and hope in the process of that to address any questions or thoughts that you may have. But do feel free to add comments to the chat at the end of this recording as well. Michael, lovely to see you.
Thank you, Lorraine. I'm excited about what's coming in a few weeks from now, because this is the third year. It's the culmination of an exploration of what leadership means. It's not a book that we've read that we're trying to implement. It's an understanding that we're listening to that is unfolding inside of us as we learn together.
No, absolutely, and it's the first time actually that I know of in the community where we've had such a sustained focus on one subject, and I think it's an indication of the significance of leadership in our times. I mean, we know leadership's always been important, don't we? There's lots of evidence of that, for better or for worse. But actually, to be bringing it out as a core subject for people who are part of the evolutionary change in a very conscious way, a very aware way. You know, there's a strong sense that each person is holding that there's a role to play, and defining that role as leadership and examining, well, what does that look like that's different to how it used to look or how we know it to look today, I think to me is such a fundamental stepping stone in our unfoldment as humanity.
Right. And I was pondering on this earlier because we talk about leadership. Leadership is the thing to talk about. I was looking at it from a very simplistic point of view. Everything in creation has a purpose. There is nothing that has been created that is redundant. So therefore, there is a need for a function inside of everything, from a microbe to a human being to a galaxy. There is a need for a functionality that says, this is why we're here and what we are asked to fulfill. This is our direction, and this is the coherence of our field. We need to be an organism. We need to be organized in order to carry out our part in this evolving ecosystem. It's a multidimensional ecosystem. So I went right back to the beginning and looked at leadership. It's not just something for human beings. Leadership is the knowing of the destiny and purpose of any organism so that it can play its part and be part of this one life. And the problem is when we're separated from a sense of a greater purpose, separated from a sense of belonging with each other. And I was reflecting also on the two basic human needs that we know from our study of psychology: meaning and belonging. And so meaning really is that direction and why we exist. Why is our group? Why is the community? Why are the groups that people belong to who are listening to this broadcast? Why are we part of these? What's its function? And how do we create some sort of coherence so that the organism can respond and not just be in survival mode, but actually be in giving mode, in what I call causal mode? It can cause things to happen. So there was a lot more, but those are some initial thoughts, and then we can get into leadership amongst human groups, etc. But I went right back to the beginning and saying, any cell, any organism on the whole scale, the whole continuum, needs to know who it is, what it's been asked to do, where it's going, and it needs to be together.
It's interesting as you're speaking, because of course, at one level, when we think about a cell or we think about a plant, or even an animal to some degree, there's a sense in which that's an instinctual knowing of belonging and participation in many ways. There's not a sort of sentient choice. And of course, humans do have and are exercising choice, free will, self-determination in that sense. And so leadership in that context also then starts to take on um, this function of how do we communicate, how do we gather ourselves together in a way that unifies and directs as a group, as a collective. So this organism, or in everyday terms of people, most people's lives, organizations or institutions or businesses or human systems of, processes getting from A to B. All of these, there's a sense in which we have to ask ourselves, what level are they being directed at, from, in what are the values, what is the meaning that is being given to those things. And there could be many people listening today, I was reflecting, who might think about leadership almost as a dirty word, as something, who would ever want to be a leader, given
Yeah.
some of the models that we've had of leadership over
Right.
the centuries.
Yes.
um,
And
so yeah, it may not feel like it's for everyone, and yet really it is, isn't it?
it is, and those are reactions to leadership. Who are you to tell me what to do, kind of thing. But if
Yeah,
I go back to you named the vegetable kingdom, you named animals. Well, let's look at the plants. When the flowers open and the sun comes up, they're heliotropic. They track the sun.
yeah, yeah.
They follow the sun. We have this freedom of choice. The consciousness of a human being is one that knows that it knows. But in knowing that it knows, we've made choices about what we think we should do, which is different from the automatic or the natural instinctual response of the sun being tracked by the plant. We can decide, no, I don't want to follow the sun. I just want to
Yeah.
follow what I want to do. And therefore, we're not following the innate uh, guidance system that is the soul of who we are.
Mm,
And
mm,
therefore, it's a recovery of leadership as well as a discovery of leadership,
mm,
and in new forms, because each age has a new understanding of what it means to lead. We're not just talking about leaders, we're talking about the function of leadership.
exactly.
And so if I was to go back and summarize the example I gave a few minutes ago, I would say the two verbs um, that are that are part of this process of direction and coherence are to align and to integrate.
Mm,
So a group needs to come into an alignment with its purpose, with its direction, the heliotropic movement towards the sun, towards something greater and more and brighter and wiser. And then the notion of integration, so that we're not just separate parts flying in close formation. We actually are an integrated group, and the connective tissue between us is a knowing that we're one,
mm,
even though we are active um, individual units inside of this, if you like, membrane. And whether that be a group of people, a company, a community, a nation, I believe we're trying to figure out what is leadership as far as who tells us what we should. If it's built in, just like a seed has got the promise of the plant and the flower. If I plant a particular seed, if it's a marigold, it'll come up with a marigold. If we plant human beings, it's going to come up with the qualities, as you say, of a human being. Now, what is a human being? We haven't really understood that, because at the moment it's, well, whatever we decide it is. We can decide whoever we want to be. However, we do have a specific function within the greater ecosystem. And so leadership is also discovering and recovering that understanding of the part we play within the greater sphere, because meaning and belonging is not just inside a group. Meaning and belonging means, where does my group, our community, our nation fit in to the larger ecosystem of nations, of communities, etc. So it's a, I've used this example before, Lorraine, it's a nested universe of lives. So we are, the reason we connect is so that we can be part of something greater. And as we aligned to something deeper and more inspirational, it gives us the energy and the movement to fulfill our part.
Yes, and I'm just again looking to kind of relate the ideas we're exploring here as within the context of how most people might relate to the word leadership from a human perspective. And um, we often see leadership in the context of someone who is over and above, a person who is over and above us. In a good sense, in a positive sense, we might be following or participating with that function of leadership because we are inspired, because we've sensed a connection with what that person is sharing, their philosophy, their values, their way of contributing. So we tend to kind of bring it together into a single identification of single leader. And we have many concepts around leader and follower and followership. And I think as we've been exploring over these last few years, this concept of leadership more deeply, which we've been calling new leadership, but of course we know it's a leadership model that exists in wider consciousness. What we're seeking to do is pull back some of the veils on it, perhaps, or deepen our understanding. But as we do that, as we work towards a better understanding of the true meaning, if I can describe it that way, of leadership, we also come into contact, I think we've been discovering, we come into contact with something that is both an individual question for every person, regardless of a function or a position within an organization. How am I leading myself? What is it that
Exactly.
informs me in the leadership of my own life? So back to those choices, am I making well-informed choices? What are the values that underpin my choices? What's the meaning that I'm making with life itself, is part of that. And how am I showing up? How am I taking my responsibility? So there's that aspect of leadership. And
Mhm.
then there's how we gather that together in collectives, in whatever shape or form those collectives might take, with hierarchical elements within them as well. So we're seeking to combine some of that hierarchical aspect with our individual free will, and coming to this collective um, understanding and practice of how we can move between being a leader and a follower simultaneously, but bound together by what you described as a common higher purpose and a common understanding of why it matters. What is the meaning? What's the value of us doing this collective work together? And then when we relate that to our world, we're seeing breakdown of our world on so many fronts, and that's opportunity. That's
Yeah.
opportunity for this um, higher imprint of leadership to start to become a living practice, I think.
hmm hmm I like the starting point is that with myself. So for
Yeah.
me, rather than being a leader, am I a good steward of my own ecosystem, my universe of self? Can I take care of Michael? It doesn't mean like from a survival point of view, but do I know what I'm being called to do? Do I have that ability to listen in the silence to the call, the inner call of, hey, this is your part in it. And by the way, and this isn't what you need to do to get your act together. And my life changed when I suddenly realized I had responsibility for this particular ecosystem. Now, if we apply that to the communities that we are part of, when we come together as individuals, we're looking at collective stewardship.
Mm,
And
mm,
stewardship for me is both a masculine and a feminine. The stewardship really is sensing the direction that we're going in and the purpose, which I know it's not hard and fast, but I would say that's more of the masculine aspect. And then the other stewardship is to make sure that everything is taken care of, that it's cared for and cohesive, which is more the feminine, the holding, the embracing. And that can be also looked at as the seed and the soil, the seed of purpose, the soil, which is the life of the organism that's got to carry out the purpose. And therefore, leadership, you have to bring these two things. You've got to bring seed and soil together, and you need to have masculine and feminine in this dynamic equilibrium inside of a group. Now, if it's inside of a leader, one person, that leader performing a leadership function needs to have, from my perspective, a dynamic balance of the masculine and feminine, knowing when one is needed and when the other is needed. And sometimes they're interchangeable within a few minutes. But I just want to pick up on what you said earlier, because when we look at coming together as groups, we're not just looking at, an ideal model. We use the word hierarchy, and you and I know that the word hierarchy scares people. A
Yeah,
lot of people.
it's a challenge,
Hierarchy.
isn't it?
I don't want anything imposed on me. And you, I know you and I basically say no. Hierarchy means this nested universe of lives, which means the life that holds us is wiser and more loving. So it's not we're under some sort of dictatorship. We're not in some sort of feudal system. We're actually being held in love and being encouraged to grow into the greater truth of who we are, our greater capacity. And therefore, a leader also creates the conditions where all the aspects of the group, the people, the members of the group, can also flower. So it's not that one is better than the other. As we're told in the spiritual teachings, all the original fiery seeds of spirit are equal. And yet, in time and space, they're in different stages of development. And sometimes we get that different stages of development being this thing of, I don't feel worthy, I don't, somebody else is better than me, and we do this comparison thing. So I think what we have to understand is the ageless wisdom teachings say hierarchy is a principle. It's not a system of governance. It simply says that we're part of this great chain of giving. And the way is to have fellowship and leadership, giving and receiving simultaneously. And I've always said that when you have giving and receiving together, when you lead and you follow together, you have flow. You allow the energy to flow through this whole greater circuitry of which we are a part. So leadership for me is more than just conducting an orchestra. It's making sure that the group that I'm part of actually is part of this greater flow of life. And whether it's seeing ourselves as part of the nation, part of an international group, or even part of Gaia, the planet. I mean, that the ecological movement has brought that awareness of what it means to be a steward or a leader that cares for all species on the planet. So I think leadership now is more than just who's in charge of a group.
Well, and actually we've seen and are seeing, continue to see many demonstrations of that leadership coming in a 360-degree perspective, with younger people raising some of the questions that need to be asked, and being able to create a sense of movement, of followership, of activism, all of which are expressions of leadership in action. And because they prompt a shift in our understanding, they prompt a shift in our individual action, they prompt something more in this purpose and meaning. We've been talking quite a bit here about how we're perceiving through the research and the work we've been doing in these conferences, leadership in a broader dimension perhaps than others through historical models might be connecting with it. We've described it as key to humanity's future, and I think we've been touching into some of this as we've been sharing here today. But it seems to me, in having we've kind of been inspired towards that title for this event, there's something here about timing and precipitation here and now. There's something about without getting too grandiose about it. Humanity is being, we people everywhere are being called to a new level of action, a new level of awareness, a new level of cooperation, um, the embodiment of new qualities, whether they're related to balance or related to courage, the masculine and the feminine that you referenced earlier as well. But we're being called to show up in a different way. And we're calling this leadership. We're calling it leadership because of all the things we've said already, because it is about individuals. And this idea that it's the key to humanity's future, I think is something about timing and the, without becoming over exaggerated about it, but the time is now. The time is here for each of us to examine how we're showing up in this world, what our relationship with it is, how we're making meaning, and connecting with purpose, and also how are each of us choosing, because we still have that choice, how are we choosing to take an even bigger step now that could in itself, if each one, there's 7.5 billion of us, if each one of us took a step towards that better world that we imagine, believe, desire, moan about not having today, if we all took that, just imagine that energy force, and even if half that number or a tenth of that number did it, the impacts that could have.
Well, thank you, because that's the key. The key is, can we bring ourselves into alignment as a species? Can we bring
Mm.
ourselves into integration? Otherwise, we're a rudderless ship.
Yeah,
And we're just going round and round in this ocean, and we're
yeah.
being asked to go somewhere and to do something, and we haven't got our bearings yet.
Mm,
It's as though the whole planet's waiting for humanity. We're
mm,
the missing link
mm,
because we don't quite understand. Oh, our role is to help imagine this and to do. We haven't figured out what role we play other than just getting by or self-satisfaction on a global level. Um, but if we only serve ourselves, it turns inward and it gets cancerous in the end.
mm, mm,
Self-serving. It has to be serving the common good, serving humanity, serving the planet, and then it's serving this great chain of life, this this great continuous um, process of evolution. Evolution has not stopped. It wasn't, oh, after, on the seventh day God rested and that was it. No, it's still happening. We're part of it. And I guess leadership is asking us to be active participants in the evolutionary process.
See,
And
this
that's
this
why it's
then
key. That's why it's key. And we're at this threshold, as you said, Lorraine, we're at the threshold where the old ways don't hold anymore.
well, they're
And
not serving us, are they?
in order to cross the threshold, we have to upgrade everything. We have to install new software, possibly new hardware, but we have to have a new program running. And the program is one of deep respect for life, gratitude, sense of compassion, love. And those tend to dissolve some of the barriers of separation. But to do that, we've got a huge freeze, emotional freeze. And there's this huge block of ice that is the, if you like, the emotional body of humanity. And so the water isn't fluid, it's not moving. And so we have to, the warmth of love, the warmth of compassion, the warmth of kindness has to melt the ice of separation so that we can then work together. And so leadership has a specific function in order to make sure that we fulfill our destiny. But before then, we've got to create the conditions where we're able to do it. Therefore, we have to do healing the planet. We have to heal the old traumas. We have to do the ecological cleanup. We have to do all these things that make us whole, because unless we're whole, we can't respond. And so, therefore, the role of a leader is to create wholeness at different levels for me. The wholeness of knowing that we're one, a wholeness knowing that we're part of something greater, which means, hey, let's place our destiny inside a greater destiny. I know this can sound very lofty, but for
Well,
me, it's
yeah.
very real, it's very down to earth. Because if I'm part of any project, I want to know, why do we exist? What's, as we used
But
to say in
I think
business,
that's what
yeah,
we're trying to articulate also here when we think about this event. Um, it could be quite easy for people to say, well, okay, well, this sounds, lovely philosophy,
yeah,
we can pick this up anywhere. This is all great stuff. What's actually going to happen in those 3 days? And you and I are very strong and clear about this, I think, in terms of where we've collectively arrived at in this journey towards understanding leadership. And that is that this event, which we're calling a conference, but this event
yeah,
is 3 days of co-creation. Yes, we've got some stimulus. Yes, there'll be some people who will be speaking, but essentially we're putting out the call, and we feel collectively we are being called to start demonstrating that new leadership in the way that we work together in these 3 days, in the things that we sense coming through, in the way that we build, even if it's not perfect, but a sort of partial synthesis a mandala, or whatever whatever word we want to give it, but a sense of, okay, it's becoming a bit clearer now what this new, in very practical terms, what this leadership imprint needs to be, and that in some ways, by showing up in this event, by participating, by rolling our sleeves up and doing the hard yards on it, if you will. Not that it hopefully will be anything other than a very joyful 3 days, but um, we are firstly giving ourselves the opportunity to step into that next demonstration of leadership. We're doing that work collectively for a wider group, for wider
yeah,
dissemination, because we hopefully will have something that can then start to be seeded more widely. Uh, but we're also seeking to be in cooperation with that higher inspiration, wisdom, understanding, we might call it consciousness, that higher expression that through our collective work and through our will and our heart, we will somehow arrive at this new place of, okay, we've got something, whether it's the full something or it's a partial something, but it's enough for the
yeah.
next steps that we need to take.
I think you raised also a really good point about, are we coming up with new leadership? Are we, or are we uncovering a new understanding of what leadership has always been at the heart of creation?
Mm.
And therefore it's a revelation, it's an unfolding. And part of what we have to do is to take away all the conditioning about what we think is right and what we think is wrong, and all the fear and trauma associated with the word hierarchy, for instance, or the word governance. Who are you to tell me? I believe in the individual right of every human being. Well, yeah, the individual right to be present and to be useful together as a community. We've got to agree on how we work together. I think leadership has been co-opted a lot by politics. And
Yeah.
therefore, and politics for me is simply the way we agree to live together and govern ourselves. But then it becomes party politics, and therefore leadership becomes very political, even inside a company or inside of a community. Leadership is a sense of power, of this and that. Leadership simply is a way for that organism to play its part, fulfill its destiny, and to be healthy and whole and joyful. The tough thing is we're so conditioned and we've been so traumatized, everything, all the things we've done to each other over the millennia, that has to be healed, and those barnacles have to be scraped from the bottom of the boat. So
Well,
yeah,
we've got so many metaphors we can work with here, but you
Yes.
mentioned one earlier of the orchestra, and in many ways I feel that gives us quite a useful metaphor, which is um, the way in which all the different instruments within an orchestra, each individual, each able to do whatever it wants in the moment. It could choose to do things well, it could choose to do things, an individual musician can do whatever. But there's the music, there's the sheet music that is being given as a frame of governance. There's the way in which different parts of the orchestra interact with each other to achieve a higher outcome, a more synthetic, a more resonant outcome. There's the role of the conductor itself, the person who is helping people to remember the different parts and the ways in which we've decided to play those parts together. And then there's the actual lived experience, which has its own vitality to it and sense of a true livingness, because
Right.
I think in organizations and organisms, often we can lose that sense of livingness because it's all become by rote. And yet, as we perform, my sense, I'm not a musician, but as people perform as musicians in orchestras or sing in choirs or come together in that type of creative collective endeavor, there's a sense of, yes, there are some rules and there's some, freedom to contribute to those rules. There's the self-expression as you, as the individual contributor, bring your part in, but also that synthesizing and coordinating element that says, let's gather the power and the force together and create an outcome that is multiplied exponentially often by the fact that the cooperation, the collaboration, the unity produces something beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. I mean, the conductor of an orchestra, as you say, ensures all the instruments are playing together, playing in the right rhythm and harmony. Everyone's reading from the same musical score, and yet you're allowed to play your own cadenzas occasionally, add to it. Um, I'd like to say it's not just the conducting of an orchestra. I believe that a leader or the leadership function also is a conductor of the electricity of spirit, the electricity of higher purpose. And that way, a leadership, and I know it works in the English language, is a lead, an electrical lead,
Mm,
ensuring there's a flow of energy into the organism, throughout the organism, and then it's able to give of itself. Because one of the things that I think most people feel in their lives when they're not fulfilled, they're not being creative together with others. Like you
mm,
said, singing in the choir, it's incredibly joyful to sing in the choir or play music with other people. I love that. And yet, how do we bring this whole choir of humanity together? And what song do we sing? Well, the song will come from our heart. It will be the
mm,
love song that lives in our heart. So I believe that the leadership function has this conducting role of conducting this electrical charge. So you could say the old-fashioned leader was in charge, but the new leader is charged with doing something to vivify, to electrify, to inspire, to vivify all the elements of the organism. So I think we can look at conductor as a conductor of an orchestra, conductor of electricity, but what we're saying is what we began with is unless an organism knows why it's there and how it can function together to carry out why it's there, it's not going to be successful. And therefore, I go back to these two things, the process of alignment and the process of integration.
mm,
And they're like the vertical and the horizontal, and then you've got the
mm,
cross. And so the
mm,
leader function stands at the cross, stands at the cross, whether it's the cross of the masculine and feminine energies or the cross of the purpose and integration of the human components of a group. But leadership has to be that point, still point at the center, but it's a still point of dynamic equilibrium, not passive. And I think that's what we're talking about. Leadership calls calls an organism into action so that it is causal and not just reactive. When we're causal, we're delivering on our promise. I mean, you and I both work in the corporate world, and I work a lot with the groups, and you ask them, what's your charter, what's your scope, what's your deliverables? Well, charter, why do you exist? You know, who asked you to do what?
Mm.
And what's your scope? What are you responsible for? And what's your deliverable? What are you being asked to deliver? By when and to whom and in what form? So you could ask the same question of humanity. Leadership is helping us understand our part in the greater ecosystem of life, because leadership in the end is what will allow us to be active participants in conscious evolution, or the evolution of consciousness.
The evolution of consciousness, yeah. So as we draw ourselves together and draw together this particular conversation to its end, I wanted to just remind people a little bit about what they can do next, and how to really connect in with this event. It is the third of three, so we have had two previous events. So that in this third one, we are going to be looking to bring this to a point of synthesis, a point of understanding as we're able to best interpret it. As much as you and I are sharing our views, we're very keen to have the contributions of all of the participants, and so it will be there'll be plenty of group workspace in this event as well, where we want to be able to hear the inputs and the developed ideas from people, not because they have to be super lofty, but because they're willing to come and participate in this group endeavour as we've outlined it here today. A reminder that this is the 22nd to the 24th of November online, and you can find the link at the Community of Living Ethics website for that, which will appear in the information at the bottom of the screen and on the Facebook page. So do check us out and find out how you can come and be part of this. I know you and I could go on for so much longer, Michael, but just a final thought, anything that's particular to you that you think would be a call to action for people coming?
Well, the reason everyone's needed is because the seed that contains the promise has to be, the only way to show it is to sow it and grow it. So, and we do it together. So what comes out will be different when we all show up fully together.
Yeah.
And therefore, we're not asking people to sign up to something that's already been created, sign your name to this. We're saying, no, there is a promise inside, there is a pattern, there is a pattern of governing or leading that is our true nature, and we're giving birth to that together. So it is revealing, unfolding, bringing our own wisdom. And the other thing to remember is it isn't just bringing all the wisdom from the past. You and I know that when we are in these events together over a number of days, there is a field that is created that in the now can receive new insights. If we're going to be heliotropic, we can receive insights from a higher source of solar wisdom. And that's really why I think we have to participate together, and we have to do it because it's in the moment unfolding of an eternal truth. But it's never been revealed before because we haven't been at a place where, one, we understood that it was necessary, and two, had the ability to at least begin the gardening process of unpacking and unfolding what lives at the heart of our humanity, and how we lead ourselves to that goal, or how we flower. So, I mean, that wasn't a brief response. It was a flowery response, but
The flowery response.
a flowery response, yes.
Well, let's hold that concept and also recognise that we individually and humanity are at a place where our own awareness and consciousness is ready, we believe, is ready to receive this new imprint. And this work that we do in the event is for ourselves individually, but excuse me, for the group as a whole, but also on behalf of humanity, and therefore it forms part of our collective service, those, you know, as we come together. So Michael, thank you as always. You and I will do this dance for 3 days together. We'll also be looking to bring, you know, some really practical, thorny issues onto the table and see what they look like from a new perspective. And hopefully, the combined wisdom of all of our participants and contributors will lead us to that new place by the end of our 3rd day that gives us a real felt sense of something shifting in our DNA. But for now, thank you to everyone listening. Please put your comments in the comments section on Facebook. We'll certainly do our best to reply to anything that comes through if there's a question. And we look forward to you participating with us in November.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Yes.
Mark.
Thank you,
Bye for
Lorraine.
now. Bye.